He's already the author of a novel based around his early days. Now this Aussie legend has published his autobiography to tell us about his days of sex, drugs and rock and roll. Please welcome to Midday, Billy Thorpe. Billy, welcome to Midday.
Thank you.
And here we go again. Most people I know think I'm crazy. Let's just look at the title of the book. I mean, you start here in a mental hospital in New York. That's where I'm going. I mean, you literally were crazy. You were in a mental hospital.
Well, I wasn't there because I was crazy. I was. I mean, what the book takes place in the medical intensive care section of Bellevue Hospital for the Criminally Insane in New York. How I got in there is what's crazy, is what's ridiculous.
So you woke up there?
With a broken arm, a heart monitor, and floor-to-ceiling steel bars with a 6-foot black guy with a pump-action shotgun, a guard, and 2 crazies chained to the opposite bed who were murderers. And I had no identification on me, so I was in there as John Doe. I couldn't get out. And they were coming around shooting everybody up with morphine about every 4 or 5 hours, so I was completely out of it. It was a funny story. You know?
So how did you get there? It
wasn't so funny. I'm not going to tell you that. You've got to buy the book. You've got to read the book to find that out. That's why you write them, you know. It was one of my life has always, at times, has been a combination soap opera, comedy movie, I don't know what, but I'm sort of the Jerry Lewis, you know.
You've lived the life. In there, you were, as you came to understand, you were clinically dead for a minute?
Yeah, my heart stopped.
Wow.
Yeah, which is how I ended up in this particular section of this hospital, because they'd run out of beds in the other section. But and it was a Saturday morning, but it's how I actually got there that's hilarious. Well, it really is funny.
Well, that's all in chapter 1. See, as we move on now, you've whet our appetite. Being the author you are, Will. We call you Will Thorpe now, a little more cred than Billy Baby. The touring, I mean, those days of the fabulous touring, I mean, you toured with some great people, but it got pretty hairy. It was more than a little dangerous at times. Yeah,
we were shot at. We were, there's a chapter in there about Canberra in the early 70s where we used to play this gig regularly in Canberra for the Young Qantas Club, which was like the yuppie set of Canberra at the Park Royal Hotel. It's a very upmarket gig in ball gowns and black tie, but big, 1,200 people. And one year we arrived and they double booked the room, so we ended up in a shearing set in Queanbeyan. And the local cockies decided they wanted to disrupt it, and a series of fights broke out, and which we were in the middle of. And so they cancelled the gig, and the police closed it down. On the way home, all these cars pulled out, and they started shooting at the van. There was a gunfight in the middle of Canberra with 303s.
And you thought, we didn't play that badly?
No, we ended up outside the Park Royal. They smashed the front doors of the hotel, and we were escorted out of town. It was like, we love you here, Thorpe, but we don't want to see you back for a while. It was one of those kinds of deals, you know. But it wasn't our fault, you know. It was like most of the adventures were innocent. Nobody was really hurt. I mean, we were lucky not to be killed that time, but they were great times. They were great times to be on the road.
As a pop star, I mean, you found success, bit of wealth quite early on, which is pretty fabulous, but it's not always necessarily the image of a pop star isn't appreciated by everyone, especially car salesmen.
You're talking about the Aston Martin?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, when I left school in Brisbane, my headmaster at that time, I was doing television 3-4 nights a week and doing gigs when I was very young, right the way through primary school and into high school. And I was always late for school, and my parents were very supportive. He hated it. And anyway, the day I left to come to Sydney, which was about 3 weeks before meeting the Aztecs, I went to see him to tell him I'm leaving school, expecting a shake of the hand. He said, "Thorpe, you're an obdurate malingerer."
Oh, sorry?
You're an obdurate malingerer. And I said, "Oh, thank you very much." I thought it was a compliment. Obdurate what, you know? And but you'll never amount to anything. And I went, oh. So it stuck in the back of me. It was one of those things that sticks in you and you think, okay, I'll never amount to anything. So I came to Sydney. It was successful. I had some money, and there was an Aston Martin, which was one of the Aston Martins that had been brought out here, I think, to promote the James Bond film, that had been used in the film, sitting in a car yard on William Street. I went in there, and the salesman just, they looked at me like, literally like I'd fallen out of somebody's nose, you know. It was like this, you know, riff-raff. So they wouldn't take me seriously, so I went up to my bank.
And they actually, in fact, asked you to leave because you looked like riff-raff.
Yeah, so I went up to the bank and got £8,000, because it was pounds, £8,000 in £1 notes, and took it back and dumped it on the floor. I said, now sell me the car, you know, and took it to Queensland. That day, I didn't have a license. It wasn't insured. I kangarooed it all the way over the bridge. This is an Aston Martin.
And I bet that salesman was
determined to give it back to this headmaster, and I stayed at my parents, and then the next morning I waited for assembly, waited for the bell at Salisbury High School, and did wheelies around the quadrangle. Gave him the finger, and drove back to Sydney. I felt great about it, you know. And got, how this happened, and the story in the book is I was actually caught for speeding heading towards the border, because the drive back in those days was very different to what it is now. And this copper pulled me over, and I told him the story, and he let me go.
He thought it was a cool story.
Yeah, well, I'd been chased by the police coming through the cane fields in north of Byron. Where's that? McLean or somewhere up around there.
And they wouldn't see a whole bunch of Aston Martins up there.
There was only one in Australia, you know, but funny times.
So you've been a bit of a, you know, a bad boy.
An idiot is what I've been. But got away with it. It's been fun. It still is fun. I mean, I'm talking like I'm dead, you know?
No, but I mean, you know, it's a funny thing how 20 years can, or 30 years sometimes makes a bit of a difference to behavioural patterns. And if we go back to those very early days, the whole pop star image, I mean, you know, you were sort of a demigod in this country. Did that improve the stakes in terms of women?
No, there was always lots of them, you know. It was the days of pop stars, I mean, and
how did women
pop stars
react
and
to
groupies.
a pop star?
Well, they chased you everywhere. Well, they weren't women, they were girls, you know. I was, in my first book, Sex and Thugs and Rock and Roll, I was only 17, and they threw their undies at you.
Were they on at the time?
No, I mean, it was, they were off at the time. That's what made it interesting. They were, all of the excesses that we've heard about, it sort of become trite in, you know, 30 years later, but they were the times, you know. They were all caught up in the frenzy of it all, and it was impossible to say no, you know.
Impossible to say no.
Impossible to say no.
Can you imagine? Ladies and gentlemen, it's impossible to say no. Have you spied out Princess Leia, by the way, up the top there? See,
Where's Princess Leia?
Back second row, see with the boom. This is
with the bagels on her head, yeah. Princess Bagel.
You know, one of the things I also enjoy about the book, now you're a child pop star, a successful child star, successful pop star. You moved to America, writer, studios, all sorts of other businesses. Now you're an author.
I'm an author.
This is Will Thorpe I'm talking to today.
It looks good on the immigration when you have to put occupation. It looks much nicer to have author than entertainer for some reason. And they treat you very differently. Oh, author. Oh, come in. Come in, Mr. Thorpe. What do you write? Oh, books. You know, if I show them a cover with the bum on it, they go, oh, my God.
Well, we'll get to... So immigration and customs, sort of, if you're an author, you get treated well, and they want to search your luggage if they think you're a pop star.
Exactly, yeah. Well, not necessarily search your luggage, but there's a definite stigma to being to being a musician for some reason. There always has been.
But reinventing yourself, you've successfully done that. How important is that in terms of life, making a living, being?
I think it's the key. I think it's the absolute... What was that? Did anybody else hear that?
Yeah. What are you doing, Jeff?
I thought it was Jeff falling off his chair.
I was just remembering the time when you came in here, the first time you played for us here. We did a show, and there'd been nothing as loud in all our lives. Do you remember your band then?
Yeah.
And I remember somebody said to me, why don't you go over to him and tell him just to turn down a bit? I said, no, you go over to him.
And if he had, what would your response have been to Mr. Harvey asking you to turn down?
Well, I'd known Jeff since the days of, we go back a long time, Bandstand, 63. I mean, yeah.
As I say, I'd been fine by me. I thought that was okay. But the audio bloke, I forget it, Max Alexander was the audio bloke, and he was saying, go over and tell him. No.
But all the cameras, we used to play so loud, all the cameras went into what's called microphony, because they all had tubes in them those days, and it looked like an effect. So the screen would be going like that at home, and people actually thought it was a great effect. You know? it was the cameras vibrating.
And while we talk about the book again, just have a look at the cover, ladies and gentlemen. The book's called Most People I Know. Now, it's a very creative cover, but I had to look. It took me a day or two, and I'm going, yeah, it's a sort of an op art 60s thing. Then I really had a good look. Just look carefully, folks. What do you reckon it is? It's a butt. Yeah, oh, yes, Helen, Princess Leia, Princess Bagel's got it. Why did you put a butt on the front of your book?
I didn't. The company did, actually. I think it's a throwback to, with the Aztecs, the Aztecs that recorded Most People I Think I'm Crazy, the Sunbury Aztecs. We had an album called More Arse Than Class, and the inside cover was our 4 bare bums. And I still get people bringing up to me today saying, which one's yours? And I say, I'm the thin one. And I think it alludes to that, you know.
Well, congratulations. You've got another book to go yet, Mr. Author.
Yes, I have.
Pop star, author, and it's great to have you. And thank you for joining us to talk Most People I Know I'm Crazy by the one and only Will Thorpe. Please thank our guest, Will Thorpe.